This is not a podcast for comfort. It's a podcast for clarity. In a culture flooded with noise, dangerous narratives, and emotional uncertainty, this space exists to examine what actually matters and what actually works. Here we question power itself, belief systems, and the assumptions most people inherit without inspection. Most people accept instead of dissect. This podcast is about correcting that. Welcome. Bienvenue. Welcome. Marhaban. Bienvenidos to the Magnificent Ones podcast. What is something actually worth, and who gets to decide? Today's guest has spent more than 25 years answering that question with precision, integrity, experience. Dan Glazier is a TEDx speaker, certified property appraiser, and the owner of Glazier Appraisals, with a career dedicated to determining the true value of things people own and often they leave behind. Dan has completed over 800 appraisal reports, specializing in personal property and household contents for estates and probate, charitable donations, insurance claims, divorce, and prenuptial agreements. His expertise spans antiques, porcelains, collectibles, mid-century modern, and period furnishings, artworks, sports, memorabilia, and jewelry. But appraisal is not just about numbers. It's about moments of transition, loss, legacy, separation, protection, and truth. Dan operates at the intersection of emotion and evidence, where accuracy matters, credibility is everything, and mistakes are costly. This is a conversation about value is established, why assumptions are dangerous, and what people consistently get wrong about what they own. It's also about trust, because when everything is on the line, facts matter more than sentiment. With that, I would like to introduce my very special guest, TEDx speaker, Dan Glazier, and host of the Value of Stuff podcast. Welcome, Dan.
Oh, thank you, Oakley. What a fantastic introduction. Thank you so much. That's great. Very, very much appreciated. And thank you for having me on. It's quite an honor. I'm a big listener of your podcast, and I love the Magnificent One. It's a great podcast. And it was just to let you know, when Spotify came to me with my top 5 podcasts I listened to, I think you were number 3. So just to let you know, I really do listen.
No, I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. And I listen to your podcast as well. And I love the message that you're delivering because, in one of your episodes, you talk about how the West looks at death. And I know that we're not doing this podcast about the matter of death, but I looked at it more of on a philosophical level of, you mentioned legacy and how what we leave behind, the lack of preparation thereof, how that can contribute to so much chaos. But you have so many, stories to tell, and I definitely want to lean on your expertise and your experience in that field. I would just love for people to just get this message out that appraisal isn't just about the physical value of things, right? Or stuff. It is about legacy, as you've mentioned. It's about, because you didn't plan, now your family is fighting over all these things. And sometimes it's not worth anything, monetarily, but the emotional value of it is priceless to a lot of people. And, just with that, just tell us a little bit about what you do, how you got there, and just how to plan these things better.
Okay, thank you. That's so I don't want to make it too long. So the question I get this all the time, like, how did you become an appraiser? And, the people think you go to, university and take, art history. Like, how do you become it? But it's sort of found me, and that happens a lot in life. You have a plan to go one way and it's the other way. So I'll make it short because it's actually a long story. But my grandmother in 1982 started a used furniture antique store. And then shortly after, my mom and my aunt took it over. I was 14 years old in 1982, so I'm dating myself here. But I've been around this most of my life. And my mom ended up taking over the business. It was really successful. And right into 1998, she had health issues. So my sister and I, we looked at each other. Did we let the business go or did we take it over? So that's what we did. So we took over the estate antique store, and then we grew it to, we bought a big property across the street from us. And that property was 14,000 square feet, 2 floors, 50 parking spots on a main street in Danforth Avenue in Toronto. And we specialized in buying whole household contents and estates. And then along the way, lawyers would say to me, could you do a report for me for probate for an estate? And are you a certified appraiser? And I didn't even understand what that was. So I did some research and I got my certification and I became an appraiser way back in 2000. So now 25 years, I've been a certified appraiser. And like you said, I've done probably at this point over 1,000 appraisal reports, and probably 80% of it is dealing with estates and some people downsizing, senior people. I kept coming across the same problems over and over where people are fighting over this stuff during an estate, and it's just creating problems after problems after problems. So that prompted me to start the podcast, The Value of Stuff, to talk about, different values that our stuff has, but a lot of estate planning and legacies we can leave. And I have a friend of mine who's a professional executor, and she has a great tagline. I asked her if I could use it. She said, yes, use as much as you want. It's called, are you leaving a legacy or a landmine? And I noticed there's so many landmines out there, and I'm trying to help prevent that so we can leave better legacies for our family. And most of the fighting and the hardest part of dealing with any estate, and almost nobody's ever talking about this, is what to do with the stuff. And when you talk about my TEDx talk, I talk about basically having a plan for your stuff before you die. So after you die, you're not messing your family up. That's the gist of it. So thank you so much. Long-winded, but I hope I answered some questions there.
No, it definitely did. So you get into appraisal and you've been doing it for 25 years. What has been something that you found to be monetarily valuable that was mind-blowing for you?
Oh,
like your famous appraisal, even if you can't share what it is or who owns it or whatnot, but maybe what was that thing for you that you were like, oh my gosh, I appraised this thing?
Well, definitely a lot of famous artwork, and that's an eye opening when you're finding pieces, especially when people don't realize they have it. Like you find a piece of artwork and it's worth 25,000 or even up to 100,000 or more. That would be like in the beginning, that got me to really pay attention to artwork. But another thing is the craziest stuff was this estate I dealt with, and there was these 3 statues, and they were all shiny. They looked kind of brassy because they were so shiny, and they're Thulu and Shu. Mm-hmm. And when I looked at them, I said, "Wow, they could be gold," but I didn't think they were gold. So gold is supposed to be marked. Your 10 carats, your 22 carat, 18 carat. There's no markings on it whatsoever, but it's just had a feeling. So I actually have a gold guy, and I called him, and I've never had to do this before. I said, Serge, could you come to the location? So he came and he looked at them, and usually he tests it on the spot, but he cut his little clippers out and he cut a few pieces off. And I was, what are you doing? In front of the client. And I was like, and he says, I got to get this tested. Those he got them tested because he had a feeling too. They were pure gold.
Oh,
and they were worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. So that was like a aha moment. So that's one that always sticks with me.
Was that earlier on in your career or later on in your career, since you've been doing it?
Probably halfway through, okay. Like 10 years in or 7 years in. So I was, seasoned enough, but this was like an unexpected thing where, you're finding value for someone like hundreds of thousands of dollars. And it was an estate, but it was like, it was kind of mind blowing all the way around. Even from myself, the executive I was dealing with, and even Serge, right? So.
So now,
and I was sure. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, continue on. I definitely want you to get it out.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, like, to see Serge, the gold guy who deals with this every day, to see him actually like not want to give a value right there either and send it away to a lab, right? I thought that was like, okay. So yeah, that's that story there.
We talked about, lawyers coming to you and asking you about, if you worked, with the states and whatnot. I ask you this because a lot of people don't prepare for this, right? And so that's how you end up with problems down the line. Can you tell people what estate planning is and maybe some steps to take on how to get there? I remember you were telling a story about, how people in Europe, how sometimes they do this downsizing thing as they get older. But I know you can dive into that portion afterwards. But what is this estate planning, and how does someone even begin that journey?
So I'm going to stay in my lane as far as being an appraiser. So I'll just talk about the stuff.
Okay.
First of all, the most basic thing is you have to have a will. Like that is the most basic thing. I talked about it in my TEDx about a study done, and there was only 50%, 90% of people say having a will is important. Only 50% when they did the study actually had a will. So the number one thing is get a will. And the other thing, talking about me as a personal property appraiser, you have to make a plan for the stuff that you own, and you need to decide who's going to get it. Are you going to sell what you're going to sell? You need to do this. I can't emphasize this enough that estate planning isn't just your finances. It isn't just your life insurance. It isn't just, your house or your cars. It's the most difficult part is dealing with all this stuff. So if you make a plan before that, you're just saving so much anxiety, grief, families fighting. I see family torn apart. I see families, they end up in litigation, and the money even, and it breaks my heart because when I'm dealing with an estate, I could just tell that this isn't what the people expected from their family. They expected, everyone can divide it up, everyone can get along, but you're dealing with so many different personalities. You're also dealing with people at I don't want to say the word worst, but you're dealing with people like emotionally. It's such a high tension. Emotions come out, past traumas come out. So much comes out when you're after the death of a loved one. And if you can eliminate a lot of the problems, then especially with the stuff, I know that's the name of my podcast, and I hammer that over and over because that's what I deal with, is valuing stuff. And I just see so many problems dealing with estates, and it can be prevented. And it's a very simple, just make a plan for your stuff, inventory the stuff that you have, and decide, what you make the decision. Don't leave it up to your kids. Don't leave it up to your executor. So that's my answer for that.
I love it. Something that's on a philosophical level that I really enjoyed hearing you say, and it's in the tagline, "The Value of Stuff," which is your podcast, is that stuff can be anything, right? How did you come to that philosophical understanding on your own?
Like called the podcast, The Value of Stuff?
Not just that, but just how did you even the concept, right? It's like the value of stuff, that stuff can be anything, which yes.
Yeah.
At a face value, yes, stuff can be anything. But what is your philosophy behind that?
Well, because the podcast, I didn't want to pigeonhole myself into just like talking about this has value, this doesn't have value, this is hot, this is not hot, this is what this or not worth. It was sort of the philosophy of, I can speak more broad, and I kind of have this sort of my own little theory here that the stuff we own and how we manage that stuff is sort of the micro to the macro of our whole life.
Yeah.
And so that's sort of my philosophy behind it. And also the same item can have a different value for different people. It might be sentimental to one person. It might be somebody thinks it's worth a lot of money. Other person says, let's just throw that in a landfill. And that's the same item. So that's sort of how I came up with stuff and the philosophy behind it.
Well, something that I think is like really, really cool is that now that you're a TEDx speaker, right? I think that now people can think about what an appraiser is, right? And that's not something that's really in public thought, you know? So I think you're in a very unique position to where you can make this field more known, as opposed to just an afterthought. I was like, oh, someone passed away. We need to get this appraised. But just knowing that, like, people like you being able to give value or state what the value of something is, not just helps us in death, but also helps us in life. So I think that it's a very, beautiful thing that you're able to now have a platform as a TEDx speaker to give light to appraisal.
Mm. Well, thank you very much. And that was my sort of the purpose of doing the TEDx is before I did it, I was just looking, I said, I'm like, the word needs to get out, right? About just dealing with your stuff and how do you value your stuff. And it's a funny thing about, yes, I do a report and I put a value down, but the funny thing is that people have to understand is I don't do the value. The market does the value.
Mhm.
I'm just, I just know how to do the research. I understand the values. There's three different values we generally deal with, like the liquidation, the fair market value, and replacement value. And they all have a different place when it comes to values. And a lot of people don't understand that. So that's why I think wherever you're located, if you can find, a good reputable certified appraiser to help you deal with an estate, help you downsizing, or for whatever reason, matrimonial, insurance, you need somebody that understands that market and the markets that you're in. And that's really important. And thank you for those kind words. That's appreciated.
Well, I've actually learned a lot by listening to your podcast, and certain things that I've chosen to implement in my life as well, and you've altered my outlook on some things as well, so positively. And you've made me, I can honestly say this, by listening to your podcast, I've been thinking more. I've always been a long term thinker, and I've been more present, by thinking about, okay, well, what gives me value now? What do I value now? Right? Because it's stuff. I'm like, okay, I value my time, I value my family, I value my friends. Your podcast has definitely helped me in that way, and finding value in the things that are in front of me as well. To just really dive into the things that matter most. And I appreciate you and your podcast for exposing that to me, and I'm grateful for it.
Well, thank you so much. You're making me blush. I appreciate it very, very much. You know what? I think as fellow podcasters, we want to get the word out there, and because we see maybe some difficulties in the world, and we can just do our little part to make it better. So I really appreciate that. And what makes me happy about you is you have a young family, and I think sometimes people think about estate planning, and I think they think they have to be in their 50s, 60s, 70s, but you kind of should start as soon as you have a family. Like that's where it should start. Like you can, it's great to start before you have a family, but once you have a family, I think you really need to think deeply. And you don't have to do it every single day, but set a date on your calendar, maybe once a year, and you look at call it a legacy plan, call it where. Make sure you have a will. Make sure your will's updated. Look at all the stuff that you own and decide, like, do we need all this stuff? And I'm coming from, I'm not a big fan of being a minimalist, but I also see that most of us have too much stuff. So it's finding that balance, and I believe in that. And I love to hear that you're thinking out this with a young family as opposed to, me saying this to someone in their 70s or 80s, which it's important at any age, but the younger, the better. And I believe once you have a child, I really think you need to start thinking very differently about what your legacy. So great. Thank you for listening. Thank you for the kind words.
Absolutely, and I will continue to listen. As long as you're pumping out content. I just in this season, we met at Podfest, and you learn so much from fellow content creators and what have you. And I've learned a great deal from you. And, that's just the whole community, is that we learn from each other. And I'm so, blessed to say that, you've been a part of my life and my podcasting journey, to be able to strive and evolve and achieve more. And I'm happy to share that experience with you. So thank you for the value of stuff and the value that you bring to me.
Well, I could say likewise because I'll tell you what you taught me is too. And it started at Podfest. So this was my second time there. I think it was your third time. And it was great finding a community of people that, most want to just make the world a better place, get their message out there. But, the friendship we have is amazing. And I love your I love your podcast. I love your stories. I love how you're a deep thinker. And it's, people should also be listening to your podcast because you're wise beyond your years, but I don't like to say that because it sounds like, you're just wise. You're just wise and you're a deep thinker. And I think as someone that has a family, that's so important. And yeah, I'm so blessed that we met at podcast last year, and we got to see each other again this year, and it was great. So, people need to listen to your podcast also.
Well, with that, I just want to say thank you, Mr. Dan, TEDx speaker, billionaire, boy philanthropist. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, well, you're just looking into the future. That's all.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right. If you enjoyed today's content, please like and subscribe for more. Be free.